Welcome into Off Air with Amy, where we're digging into an important investigation by Pro Publica. I've got the reporter on the way on the hot mic who's going to tell us how she discovered in some places there were no evacuation orders and people faced terrifying amounts of water. It was a 4-month investigation. She looked at 500 plus postings, alerts, etc., to analyze what exactly were people told. And in one county in particular, she found serious problems. I want you to meet Jennifer Barry Hawes, and I want you to also take a look at some of the videos she was able to gather.
Houses are going. Oh my God.
So Yancey County is in the rural mountain area. It isn't one that had gotten a lot of attention. And so when I originally started this reporting, I went to Asheville and Swannanoa, which is where a lot of people start because it's the population center. And Asheville Buncombe County had the highest number of deaths, but Yancey County had the most per capita. And so when I went there, I wanted to capture this idea that a lot of people in our region will understand, which is that real love for the place and the landscape, and also how that landscape really sort of betrayed them. And so Yancey was a perfect place. It's beautiful. It had not gotten a lot of attention, and had seen a large loss of life.
So when you dug into this and you looked, I think I read that you looked at 500 pieces of alerts and things, like analyzing who sent out what and what was the public told to prepare for this. Were there evacuation orders? And you discovered there really weren't in Yancey County. Is that right?
That's right. And not just in Yancey County, but in other counties as well. There was a real big disparity between the counties. So you had some areas, I'll use as an example, Haywood County, or I'm sorry, let me say McDowell. McDowell County issued mandatory evacuation orders for very targeted areas. They had voluntary evacuations. They put out flyers in English and Spanish. They did door knocking. So they had one of the more robust responses, especially outside of Buncombe County, which is obviously larger, has a larger emergency management operation.
Mm-hmm.
But in places like Yancey County, the emergency manager is often also the fire marshal or the 911 supervisor. And they sometimes don't have a ton of actual emergency management training. And so when we looked at the messaging that the counties were putting out to their populations, we found that there was just a big variety. And in Yancey County, the officials had put out messaging that we saw in several other counties. It was along the lines of, you might consider leaving if you live somewhere that has flooded before. Well, that's not a really specific or direct set of information that the public can use to take action. I live on the coast now. I used to live up in Greenville, but I now live in Charleston. And one of the things that people in our area and all along the coast have learned is very specific actions to take when you're told to evacuate. And I've wondered, since reporting this story, if there might be lessons learned from Helene that the inland communities can use as well. For instance, there's a program called Know Your Zone on the coast, and that tells people like where I live if you need to evacuate or not if a hurricane's coming, because the whole coast doesn't have to evacuate for every storm. They can issue more targeted directions based on where you are and how much risk you're in. And so I wondered if we move these programs inland, if that's not a way that we could help keep people out of harm's way when other storms come, because it doesn't take a hurricane to create deadly flooding situations.
No, and we've seen the flash flooding in the mountains before with landslides over the years, and you talk about in the story there has been an effort over the years to do some landslide mapping to give people sort of a better feel for where the risks really lie, and that's never been completed, is what you reported. Is that right? So, is there any effort to try to complete that at this point?
They are. So the state of North Carolina created this landslide hazard mapping program by county after they'd had a number of landslide deaths. The state halted that program 10 years, then restarted it in 2019. But when Helene hit, because of that gap in time, all of the counties had not yet been mapped. And that included Yancey and several others that were hit very hard by the storm. That will get done unless it's defunded again, but it's on track to be finished. They're just wrapping up McDowell County as we speak.
And you also delved into, which I thought was really remarkable, that there is no mandatory training for these local emergency managers who, like you said, sometimes are people wearing multiple hats, doing multiple jobs in these tiny communities, all volunteer for the most part, and so that's concerning, right? That you have local officials making the call, whereas in South Carolina, it's the governor and state emergency managers who are saying, get out, evacuate. They're making the read on the situation. But in North Carolina, it's up to the local folks to decide that?
That's right. So the state of North Carolina doesn't have any requirements for emergency manager training. Some emergency management offices that get federal funding can have strings attached from that funding that requires training, but the state of North Carolina doesn't in and of itself have requirements. So if you're advertising a job in a county, you can yourselves put on requirements, but they're not mandated by the state.
Gotcha. And when it comes to fixing this for the future, do you think is there a suggestion that North Carolina needs to somehow kind of take the South Carolina approach, have more experienced, trained, and knowledgeable state leadership take the reins on these kind of calls?
I think the rub is that in some of the rural communities, they can struggle to hire because they sometimes don't pay great. The job, like I said, can involve many hats.
Yeah.
So I think there's a tug and pull between what they require and being able to recruit for the positions. I haven't heard any effort afoot in North Carolina to require more as of yet, but we'll see. These positions are going to be more and more important as storms become stronger. Obviously, we all want our communities' emergency managers to be as prepared as possible. Many of them that I spoke to, especially in rural communities, said one of the big challenges for them is that they, for them to take 3-4 days away from their duties to go to training is difficult because, again, they're also the 911 supervisor. They're going out on disaster. They're helping with disaster response. It's difficult. They don't have a lot of other people in their offices to help cover when they're gone.
You told stories within this focused on particular people that lived along a couple of creeks and a river that, sort of took the focus in Yancey County. And the stories were so powerful because you had like a husband and wife. He had to leave on a trip. Obviously, no one was really predicting exactly how bad it would be at the point he left. And they're thinking it's going to be, there's been flooding before. So they're like, oh, it's going to be some flooding like we've seen before. And then lo and behold, you tell this unraveling story of how she gets lost in this flooding situation. I mean, talk about some of what's the story to you that stands out, or the piece of information, the human story that stuck with you the most as you dug into this? I mean, you talked to everybody in this area, right?
Yeah, and it was such a powerful story. Her name was Jeanette Glenn, and she just seemed like such an amazing woman. And her husband was so generous to share their story. But theirs is really indicative of what I found, that the Weather Service was really pretty accurate with its forecasts, and its messaging before the storm about how dire it would be was really on point. But I found so many people who were in their homes along these rivers and creeks as they flooded, and then suffered either as terribly as Jeanette did, who unfortunately and just tragically died, but also people who were in their homes and survived, but went through really, really traumatic situations of trying to escape floodwaters and landslides. And the thing that left me was just the idea that all of these people were in their homes really pretty unaware of the gravity of the situation approaching. And, as a journalist, my goal was to bring attention to that problem and to honor the people who we lost, but also to try to be thinking about what lessons can we learn from Helene? How can we, moving forward, do a better job of keeping people out of harm's way? I think, we can't say anymore, oh, we I had no idea it could be this bad, or I'd never experienced something like that, or I'd never seen the rivers flood this way, because, now we have. Mhm. We need to be prepared for the next storm. The primary killer of people in a hurricane, it's now freshwater flooding. And that means that we've gotten better at getting people out of harm's way on coast, but we need to be doing better about getting them out of harm's way inland. And so my hope would be that elected officials, not just, like I said, in North Carolina, but across the country, are thinking beyond their own past experiences. Because if weather patterns are becoming more extreme, we need to be prepared in ways that are outside of our normal boxes of thinking. And that's really ultimately what I hope this story does, is gets our leaders thinking that way. We're already a few days into hurricane season, and who knows what this one will hold. And I hope we're more prepared. And also, as I said, not just for hurricanes, but it can be for these big rain bombs that we've been seeing also more and more of.
Some of the people you interviewed told stories of how, yes, there was a great alert that came out, but the cell towers had stopped working and they didn't get that alert. Has there been any conversation that you have gleaned about any kind of a fix in the future for communications in this kind of an event?
I think one of the big things that came out from this was the importance of things like Starlinks that can help people stay connected when the cell towers are out. Also, people with newer iPhones that could establish a satellite connection proved to be really valuable. So I think they're thinking about those things. I know the subject has come up on some fronts about the Viper radio system. That's the system that the first responders were using that did still work, but it was so overwhelmed because everything else was not working that it became sort of borderline functional. The first responders I talked to said it would take like 8-10 times of trying just to get a call out, which is obviously not how we want to be operating in an emergency.
We can learn. Well, we sure hope we learn the lessons. And I do highly recommend reading Jennifer's article. It is just powerful. So Jennifer, thank you for writing it. I hope you all get a chance to read it. And I appreciate the work you're doing with Pro Publica. You do a great job.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
All right, we appreciate Jennifer so much for sharing that investigation. Now to the comment of the week that ties into the gunshots fired outside Haywood Mall. Got a lot of your attention. So many comments coming in on this. Karen Eastburn saying people really need to learn to cope with their disappointment in personal relationships or grudges and learn how to solve disagreements without violence and without guns. Appreciate her commenting. And now to our next story. Do you remember Tucker Hips? He was the young man who pledged the fraternity at Clemson. He was on a run with his pledge mates, and the worst thing happened. He died. They've never been able to determine if there were any wrongdoing in terms of charges, but the family's always been convinced he was hazed, and they want to fight against hazing. Here's his mom, Cindy.
University of South Carolina had a hazing summit where they invited the Stop Hazing Elizabeth Allen. She's a professor at the University of Maine, and she's done the most extensive research on hazing. And so that was written in conjunction with her visiting the University of South Carolina. And also another organization called hazinginfo.org. They're kind of new on the scene where they take data that's already out there and do some research on it as well. And so she had shared her research with me about the 77 incidents since 2018 from the Tucker Hips Transparency Act. But it's only gaining the information from the universities that are supported by the state. And
right.
So
Public
that's
universities.
moving out. Yes, all the other universities, that data is not really available. There are a few that self-report like Furman, but most schools don't. And so now with the new hazing legislation that was passed at the end of December, this past December, then all hazing has to be reported under the Clery Act. So I don't know if you know. This is federal.
This is federal, right?
It is federal, and it was signed off by the president on Christmas Eve.
Wow.
And so that bill allows for all the universities that accept any federal funding has to report hazing along with all their other incidents on the Clery report. And so that comes out every year. But a step further is they have to publicly display it, like the Tucker Hips Transparency Act, twice a year.
Okay.
And so that's been worked on for many years, that legislation, really right after Tucker died. There was other families that have been working towards that bill. I've only gotten involved the last 3 or 4 years with that particular legislation.
Has it been heartbreaking for you with your own loss and turning it into advocacy to then keep meeting more and more families who are on the same journey?
It absolutely does. Because, so Tucker's been dead 10, almost 11 years.
Wow.
And so to have these incidents still going on, it just makes no sense to me. The culture hasn't changed, really. Yeah, it cycles. So, after Tucker died, things started changing. We didn't see as many infractions. Well, they're back up again. I think people that get caught hazing, they should be kicked out of school. And there definitely should be some other violations criminally than just hazing, because it encompasses so many things. But if somebody dies, there should be some charges there, which, there never was in Tucker's case. I mean, we have lots of evidence of hazing. We still don't know exactly what happened to him, but we do know that he was hazed along his journey, and so were many of those other fellas.
In all these years, I mean, we're 10 years down the road, that no one has said anything, that it somehow hasn't come out.
It does amaze me, because, you were there from the get-go. And I remember, we kept thinking we were going to get the answers. We went through all the depositions, and we never got all the answers. And so it amazes people that many boys can stay quiet. But after learning more about this culture, it's not surprising. And I've had people that knows this culture tell me they will go to their deathbeds without telling what really happened to Tucker.
What do you think it is going to take to break through the culture?
Definitely, I think that if you thought that you were going to get kicked out of school, and if you thought you might really do some jail time, yes, I think that you would. I think it would deter it. I really do. And I don't want to see a bunch of kids go to jail. But I think if that was what you were worried about, then yes, I think that people would stop doing it.
You have the 77 figure, right? Since the Tucker Hips Transparency Act, 77 reports of hazing. But you guys believe, based on this summit that you just went to, that there's much more happening than just what's been reported. So what do you think it takes to get kids to feel comfortable on campus reporting this stuff?
I think that they just need to know that they can report it without anything happening personally to them. And I think, they're always afraid of what the other kids think. So I think there needs to be more anonymous reporting. But you got to have the facts, and the university's not going to do anything about it unless they have the facts. So we do need to make sure that the kids know that they can report it without any retaliation. The universities have to do their job, the national organizations have to do their job, and the parents have to do their job too, by maintaining a relationship with their kid where their kid can tell them anything. Anything you suspect that is different, don't hesitate to reach out to the university. I mean, they have all kinds of things in place for parents to report any kind of issues with their kids.
Palmetto Boys State is getting ready to start now. And I was seeing Seth post about one of the big leaders of Palmetto Boys State posting about it's almost time and all this stuff. And Tucker Hips was a critical personality at Palmetto Boys State, where they take all these young leadership potential men across the state, pick a few from each congressional district, and lawmakers, everybody kind of puts these kids in, but they're kind of handpicked as leaders, and then they go to this event and learn about politics, and they have, they elect leaders and do legislation. It's just a really cool experience in leadership for young men in South Carolina. And Tucker was one of those guys, and he was kind of the shining star. There are so many cool videos I remember of him, like with his selfie stick running around the stage and all this stuff. He was just an amazing young man. personality jumped through the screen. I mean, he was just all his pictures, everything beautiful, attractive, handsome young man, smart. You have tried to carry on his legacy and the tradition of Boys State by doing some special things there. Talk about the scholarship and the golf tournament and how you continue to like keep the momentum going to put more young men in this program.
Yes, we're excited that Boys State actually starts this coming weekend. There's a run on Saturday. So if anyone's interested, they should go sign up under Friends of Boys State. But that'll be this Saturday, and that kind of kicks off Boys State for the whole next week. And we will go on Friday night and be there for when the Tucker Hips scholarship is given to a senior counselor. And it's actually voted on by the other senior counselors. So it's a very special award. And they do get a scholarship with that. And then, you know, all the fundraising that we do, most of our money does go to Palmetto Boys State because Tucker was so excited about Boys State. He would say, do not make any plans. I'm going to Boys State.
Yeah.
So he was headed back for his 4th year, but he loved it. And it really is a changing week for those young. I always encourage my friends to make sure your kid gets to go to Boys State. And it really is a wonderful week. Those men pour their hearts into those kids. And, you know, I think that's the brotherhood that Tucker was seeking when he joined a fraternity. I think he thought it would be like Boys State, but there is no other group like Boys State. I really encourage young men to try to go to Boys State.
Yeah.
When
it comes to families that just are not aware of the hazing dangers, what can you say to them to kind of wake them up and open their eyes?
I can say that if they're pledging their hazing, there's some organizations that don't require a pledging process, and so they probably are not hazing. But most fraternities that do have a pledging process, they are hazing in some form or fashion. And to me, there is no minor or major hazing because it builds up to become major. And it starts out small. I think that the students need to stand up. And if they stand up as a group and say, we're not doing this, I don't want to be involved in this, they are seeking people to join their organizations because they need those numbers. They need those numbers to be able to continue their national organizations because it's all about the money.
Yeah.
And so I think if the students just stand up and say, nope, I'm not doing that, I think it would go a long way.
When it comes to Tucker Hips, up there in heaven, looking down on you, what do you think he would say to you if he could be right here with us right now about all the work you've done, the golf tournament that comes up in the fall that helps to raise the money for the scholarship, the work you've done to get the Tucker Hips Transparency Act passed, and you're continuing to fight for, you know, better laws and better approaches to try to keep other families from going through this. What would Tucker Hips say to you, do you think?
I think he would be proud. I think he would be on board with everything that we've done. He would, you know, he was an advocate for his fellow classmates. He was always that kid that stood up for the kid at school that was being picked on or was different. You know, he was just that kid. So I think he would be very proud of us. And I think definitely, I know that he would have continued on with Boys State. And I know he would be one of those leaders because he would be 30 years old now. And so I'm sure he would still be at Boys State. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, he would. He'd be right up there with Seth and the gang.
Yes, he would. And we miss him every day.
Know.
There's not a day goes by that we don't miss that kid.
Oh, I bet you don't. And we appreciate you sharing your efforts and helping to raise awareness because Lord knows, I mean, you didn't realize, right? I mean, when you think back, you had no idea. And nobody was out there telling you these things. So here you are doing it for other moms and dads, and that's just amazing.
And I hope so. And I know sometimes people gets tired of me ranting on Facebook. This is all this woman thinks about. But I just want people to have the knowledge.
A devoted mother and a devoted father who supports as well, with Gary Hips being an amazing guy. Stay with us. Something good is coming up next. Welcome back. We've got something good on the way today. Check out what you guys are saying on the streets.
We found a new cat. How about that?
Wait, what?
Yeah.
What do you mean you found a new cat?
We rescued a cat.
Aw.
She showed up one day. She just had babies, and we couldn't find the babies anywhere, and she was really hungry, and we took her in, and she's doing really good now.
Yeah,
so.
she's the sweetest cat you'd ever meet.
What's going on? Tell me something good.
Well, my in-laws are coming in town this weekend, and they came last weekend. They're in New York, and they're coming back down.
Wow,
So
they must
we're-
like it here.
Yeah, they really like it here. It's a nice area.
I'm graduating medical school this weekend.
Oh my goodness, that is a big accomplishment.
Yeah, we're very excited. So I'm graduating medical school this week.
That's a big deal.
Yes,
Oh my
I'm very
goodness.
excited.
All right, so we've had a great time. Thanks for watching this week. I'm Amy Wood, and I'll see you next week.